for me as an experienced educator, the answer is what is our, is it a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, but a clear plan for how we will, in this city where we have neighborhoods that are mixed in terms of income for the most part, how do we return to saying we want to educate everyone in the neighborhood in which they live, so that the person who's living in the mansion on St. Charles is being educated with the person 4 blocks away who's in a federal housing? Will they go to school together and have us as a city say we want to educate everyone, not have the school for those who most succeed and the school for those that we consider leftovers? That's a long-term thing that I think government has a major role to play in. How do you help organize your citizens to act, to help them find pathways to act more as citizens? Or we as citizens need to realize what the government is doing and organize ourselves and say we want to make sure that everyone is educated well, and we will develop the resources and do the work that makes that happen. We did that in this community generations ago when there was legal segregation, and people still found a way to have a high-quality education. We could do it again.
Any other questions from jurists?
Yes, we do.
Oui, je voulais d'abord poser comme question, quel lien existe-t-il entre celui qui était le très puissant syndicat dans l'État de Louisiane, c'est bien ça, ou à la Nouvelle-Orléans, et le reste des États-Unis? Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas une structure syndicale fédérale sur laquelle vous pouvez vous appuyer pour vous aider dans ce difficile combat? C'est la première question. Et puis,
first question is what are the links that you have as a local with the national union, and can't that union, or has that union put resources behind helping you win back your schools and win back your jobs?
Oui, et la deuxième question, c'est, je suis quand même très douloureusement interpellée par le fait qu'après tous les sacrifices qui ont été consentis par les habitants de Nouvelle-Orléans pour venir voter, comme l'ont montré les témoignages précédents.
I'm just very struck by the fact that, as the previous testimony showed, that people made such tremendous sacrifices to come back to be able to vote.
Il semble qu'il n'y ait eu aucun changement positif sur notamment la question de l'éducation après les dernières élections qui ont donné la majorité qu'on sait. Voilà.
I'm wondering if, with the last election that gave a majority to the Democratic Party, has there been a shift in relation to your the issues that you face as a teacher unionist?
The first question, our national union has been very helpful. In terms of the operations of our teacher organization, it's been funded by our national union with additional staff from the AFL-CIO as well. And our work has focused primarily on rebuilding our membership and making sure that people who come to town understand the importance of us working as a collective to improve education for everyone, and the importance of teachers being part of this democratic process through a collective action. So the national union has helped on that front primarily. I've lost train of thought of the second question.
Can a translator help us repeat that second question?
Oh, with the Democrat, I got it now. The Democratic Party taking control of the slim control of the. I would say that has been a good deal less helpful to our situation in New Orleans in terms of the issues of justice and equity.
very delicately put.
And frankly, part of that has to do with our delegation from Louisiana taking the lead on ensuring, and did this before the storm and after the storm, ensuring that money was funneled to charter schools. And I'm not, see how I say it, because I'm not terribly in favor of charter schools. My union is not opposed to charter schools and helped found them. I have colleagues who are, in favor of them. But the problem, and I will say that the community group of which I'm a member, the Douglas Community Coalition, and the organization with which I work, Students to Center, have been approached about doing a charter school. And we said, in New Orleans, no, because it's clearly a tool of moving education from a democratic right to a market good. And we did not want to support that level of privatization, that level of seeing education as something for which people compete as opposed to something they build. So our Democratic senator before the storm was pumping money into charter schools. And mind you, I'm a graduate of the New Orleans Public Schools. Our senator is not a graduate of the New Orleans Public Schools. We grew up in the same city in different places. The school from which she graduated is right across the street from where I teach every morning. They built a nice new gym. Our school doesn't have a gymnasium. I could go on and on. But no, to answer the question short, the Democratic Party has not helped the situation I described in New Orleans.
Any other questions? Mr. Garcia.
Okay. Gracias, James, por tu intervención muy precisa. Yo creo que los miembros y miembros del jurado necesitamos precisar algunos datos también estadísticos.
Thank you, first of all, for your testimony. And I think we, as judges, need to have
para
a
decir
little
al
more clarity
mundo
on some of the statistical
para decir al mundo la verdad
to tell the world the truth
sobre qué pasa en la educación después de Katrina.
about what's happening in education after Katrina.
En primer lugar, queremos saber, quisiéramos también precisar la deserción escolar
What is
durante
the
estos
drop?
2 años después de Katrina.
What would you say is the dropout rate from schools 2 years after Katrina?
Segundo, no, ya va, son 7 puntos. Segundo, repitencia escolar. ¿Cuántos niños repiten el
How
año?
many children have to do a year over again? Repeat.
Tercero, usted ya lo ha dicho, migración forzada de los docentes, de los maestros.
You've talked about the forced numbers, about forced migration, forced eviction of teachers.
Cuarta, calidad de los docentes
What,
que están impartiendo ahora clases.
the question of quality, you've referred to it, but any quantitative ability to determine this of those new teachers.
Okay. Quinto, violación de la libertad sindical.
You've
Usted lo ha
mentioned,
dicho.
you've mentioned the violation of trade union rights
Sexto, violencia escolar.
in terms of any
Si hay indicadores de violencia
are there
escolar
greater
después de Katrina.
indicators of violence at schools 2 years after?
Séptimo, el problema del currículum.
And last, the issue of the curriculum.
Esta mañana se habló del problema del currículo, del cambio del currículum.
This morning we heard about the change in the curriculum.
Y usted ha expresado la preocupación sobre el problema del cambio del currículo.
And you've also expressed a concern about the change in
Que antes
in
de
the school
Katrina-
curriculum. That before Katrina,
Existía un currículum crítico, ¿no?, de la sociedad,
it was more critical, open-minded curriculum in relation to the issues facing
se
society.
insistía mucho en la importancia de la cultura y de la historia africana,
And in which there was important attention paid to continuity and history of African culture.
y sabemos que el currículo es la clave para formar a un ciudadano y a una ciudadana crítica.
We know that curriculum is key to forming a critical and open-minded citizen.
Y esto está relacionado tal vez con la ley de noviembre del 2005 del estado de Luisiana,
This would appear to be linked to the law of November 2005 in the state of Louisiana,
que es crear un ciudadano sumiso,
which would be to create a submissive citizen,
no crítico
non-critical,
y que pierda la esperanza
and that would lose hope,
de la liberación de su propio pueblo.
and hope in the ability to forge the liberation of their own people.
I don't have the exact, see if I can remember all the questions. I don't have the exact dropout rates. I know the graduation rate declined, and again, it depends on school you're talking about. So in the recovery district schools, the rate dropped. I know that there are local groups, the Juvenile Justice Project in particular, and Safe Streets, Safe Communities folks who have done particular studies on these dropout questions. And Damon, am I correct that those reports are in here, or are they not?
Some of those reports are not included, but some of the young people will speak to those issues later on. And we, with the Justice's permission, we would like to augment the record with some of that information either tonight or tomorrow.
There are some studies that have been done that give those exact numbers. I don't have them, with me. But I would say that I've heard and seen that those numbers increased, and in particular the students I teach at the high school, the graduation rate declined in many cases because they couldn't get records from the schools to which they had evacuated. They couldn't. The state had not provided any kind of central student data system, and so students were not often scheduled into the classes they needed, and so some students didn't graduate on time because of that. So there were a range of problems there. To address the question of the curriculum that you raised, the state has never, before or after Katrina, specifically encouraged the sort of African studies you mentioned or liberation curriculum in any specific way. What had happened was that on a local level, when folks from New Orleans had a little more control of the education, for instance, we had an African studies department in the New Orleans public schools. I spoke with a colleague of mine who worked closely with that project and was considering moving back to New Orleans, but wanted to come if he could teach Africana studies, which is what he was doing before the storm, and that position was not available to him now. At the same time, as I mentioned, we're not often going to have the state entities help us with that. So I would say that we always had a cadre of veteran teachers who understood how to deliver the state curriculum in a way that gives the curriculum, but also offers a critical approach to it. And I can say that my colleagues who understood how to do that were doing that, and those of us who are here continue to do that, and those of us who are here, welcome with open arms the young teachers who are coming to town, and we've just taken on mentoring some of them in how to do this. So we will, we will still be teaching the curriculum that the state gives, but there are many ways to teach that curriculum, and to teach it well, and to teach it for liberation, and that's certainly a major goal of the students at the center and other teachers in town with whom I work. And that's frankly going to be part of the work of us as teachers as a collective, to do that, to not count on a state function for that, but to count on those of us who are teachers to do it.
Very short question, because this is going on. We haven't talked about the death penalty yet, but it's sort of haunting me as I hear all these testimonies, and my question to you is about the young black male, because we do a lot of prison visiting in the state of Pennsylvania, but many of us elsewhere, and some of us go to death row, and we see the young men, very young, very, very young, and what is the link between dropping out and being left over and being arrested and becoming a criminal, in quotes?
I would say there's a direct link, although it's not the only link. We have an economy here. We have a history of racism here. We have a country and culture that doesn't honor people who don't fit a certain mold, who don't think in a certain way. So I would say there's a direct link, but it's not the only link.
Thank you. Question?
C'est pas une question, mais du fait que on parle de l'éducation, cela m'intéresse beaucoup. Donc, je me rappelle, en 2004, je suis professeur et enseignant de la section kindergarten. Donc, je suis fondatrice d'une école pour les enfants pauvres en Haïti.
I'm a teacher, and I'm interested in, obviously, as a teacher in these issues, as a founder and a teacher in a school in Haiti.
Et en 2004, le maire qui est à la mairie de Pétionville voulait fermer mon école parce que je voulais embrasser les enfants pauvres.
And the mayor in Pétionville closed our schools in the name of wanting to embrace the poor children.
Il n'arrive pas à le faire à cause des amis de l'extérieur. Il n'arrive pas à le faire parce que donc ils m'ont porté des secours.
But they weren't able to go ahead with that because friends from abroad came forward and helped us, came to our aid.
Et en mai 2006, le 9 mai 2006, il y a aussi une autre délégation qui sort de la mairie de Pétionville avec des policiers armés, voulait aussi fermer cette école. Donc je suis vraiment touchée concernant le problème d'éducation.
I just want to say how touched I am. We've confronted the mayor, and then a police operative came into our schools to try to shut down our public schools, and we resisted. So I just have to tell you how important the front line of this struggle you are part of.
Aussi en tant qu'enseignant.
And I say that as a fellow teacher.
Thank you.
Oui, salut collègues. Je suis moi-même syndicaliste enseignant à la Martinique. Je te remercie pour toutes les informations précises que tu nous as apportées.
I'm a teacher myself in Martinique. I want to thank you for all the exact, precise information that you've given us.
Alors quand nous analysons la situation, c'est ce que nous disons, que le marché mondial a de plus en plus besoin d'individus, de personnes ayant des compétences. Parce que quand les personnes ont seulement des compétences, on peut les exploiter à merci.
What we see more and more is in this new global economy that there's a shift toward turning education, as you say, into a commodity where students are no longer have education but are given minimum skills.
Maintenant, les travailleurs conscients recherchent des qualifications pour pouvoir effectivement discuter de leur salaire et imposer effectivement un comportement au gouvernement, oui.
But those of us who are in the education sector know that we have to provide knowledge and qualifications and critical thinking so that we can build a better society for ourselves.
Et c'est ce droit imprescriptible à l'éducation qui peut garantir effectivement l'accès à ces qualifications.
And it's the right to have access to those schools. It gives us the right to have that training, those qualifications.
Alors, dans les oligarchies modernes, je m'excuse, dans les démocraties, traducteur, il faudrait traduire,
Yes.
l'excuse.
I was in the modern oligarchies, in these new democracies.
Alors, dans ces soi-disant démocraties,
In
le
these so-called
droit à
democracies,
l'éducation, le droit à la qualification est assuré. Est assuré. Mais pour qui?
The right to education, the right to qualifications is ensured, but for whom?
Le droit à la santé est assuré, mais pour qui?
The right to health care is ensured, but for whom?
Le droit au logement est assuré, et pour qui?
And housing, but for whom?
Alors, je ne vais pas continuer avec toute cette énumération. J'ai juste une question à poser.
Just, I was moved by this, so I have to say, just in terms of a question.
Les minorités, j'ai vu mes frères indiens, j'ai vu mes frères africains-américains.
I've seen my indigenous brother, I've seen my brothers and sisters, my African-American brothers and
Et
sisters.
je vois que ce sont ceux-là qui se plaignent effectivement de la situation aux
And those
États-Unis
are the ones
d'Amérique.
who are crying out here in the United States.
Et je réalise qu'aucune de ces minorités n'était là quand la Constitution américaine a été rédigée.
But I have to note that none of those were present when the Constitution was
Par
drafted.
conséquent, cette Constitution ne leur est pas adressée, ne s'adresse pas à eux, ne s'adresse pas à nous.
But that Constitution is not addressed, therefore, to
Et je
us.
me permets de dire cela parce que je viens d'une dernière colonie, une colonie française dans la Caraïbe.
I say that because I come from one of the last colonies, a
Quand je
French
le dis,
colony
mon
in the
cœur
Caribbean.
saigne.
My heart bleeds.
Et je ne voudrais pas qu'on interprète mal mes propos ici
Please
aujourd'hui.
do not misinterpret my words here today.
C'est un homme qui souffre qui parle.
It's a man who suffers that speaks.
Oui, un homme qui souffre et qui dit que ces constitutions-là,
Who
celle
says
de la
that
France pour les colonies françaises,
French
celle
Constitution for
de
the
Washington
colonials,
pour les
for the
minorités aux
colonies.
États-Unis,
That one of Washington for the
toutes
minorities.
ces constitutions devraient être réécrites de manière effectivement à mieux s'adresser
Should
à la
be rewritten.
diversité à l'intérieur des nations.
So that there can be a greater attention paying to diversity and to our needs, to the needs of our people living
Oui,
in
c'est
this
vrai, on
nation.
pourrait encore parler longtemps, mais c'est ça ma question
And
finalement.
that is my question, if you could address in terms of the
Serait-il
right.
possible, serait-il nécessaire,
Would it
serait-il
be
intéressant que
necessary,
les
possible,
syndicats
interesting that the union
s'adressent à cette question, c'est-à-dire
would
que
concern themselves
les
with this
États-Unis
question,
modernes, la
that in
France
this
moderne,
modern,
cette démocratie,
these
devrait
democracies,
tenir compte que le monde a évolué, qu'il s'agit maintenant de développer la fraternité, l'éducation, le droit à la santé
that we
publique.
have to go beyond the rights that exist on paper, but that don't really exist for our communities.
Oui, voilà ce que j'ai à dire. Merci beaucoup.
Before we continue, I just want to explain, we have 3 more witnesses to be presented for this sector, and it is now going on 7 o'clock? So it is late. So I'm going to ask my dear brothers and sisters, jurists, to please shorten your comments to questions so that we do not spend the night here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Randalls. Really appreciate you. I'd like to call next Ms. Kathy Boisseau. Ms. Boisseau, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the